Welcome to Communicate to Lead, the podcast that empowers leaders and aspiring leaders to communicate with clarity and impact. I'm Kele Belton, CEO and successful entrepreneur, and your host for today. I'm here to equip you with all the essential tools and strategies to master effective communication and lead your team to success. As the founder and CEO of The Tailored Approach, my goal is to empower you to be the best leader you can be. So sit back, relax, and join me in today's episode as we dive into the art of communicating like a true leader. A client I worked with last month, let's call her Simone, had done everything right. She had a mentor. Actually, she had two. Both were senior leaders in her organization who genuinely liked her, gave her feedback after her presentations, and told her she had what it took to move into the VP role she had been working towards for 3 years. And yet, when that VP role opened up, she was not even in the conversation. A colleague with less tenure and, by her manager's own admission, less consistent results was promoted instead. When Simone came to me, she was exhausted and confused. And she said to me, I did everything they tell me. I take the feedback, I show up. What am I missing? I asked her one question. Do you have a sponsor? She paused. And then she said, I have mentors. And that right there, my friend, that pause is the gap we are talking about today. Welcome back to Communicate to Lead. I'm your host, Kele Belton, and this is the podcast where high-performing women in leadership learn to communicate with clarity, authority, and intention so that your work, your voice, and your vision get the recognition they deserve. If you are new here, welcome. I'm so glad you found this show. And if you've been here for a while, thank you so much for coming back. Before we get into today's episode, I want to give you a quick heads up. If you have listened to episode 131 of the show, where I talked about the difference between mentors and sponsors and the power of strategic advocacy language, today is going to feel connected to that conversation, but it's not the same conversation. Episode 131 gave you the framework for what sponsors do and why they matter more than mentors when it comes to career resilience. If you haven't heard it yet, I'm linking to it in the show notes. So go ahead, click the link in the show notes and listen to episode 131. Think of episode 131 as the foundation and today as the next floor up. Because today we're asking the harder question. Why do so many high-performing women never get sponsors in the first place? And what do you do about that? This is a gap analysis, so to speak, and a solutions episode. And by the end, you'll have a concrete framework you can begin using this week. So let's dive in. And let's start with the data, because understanding the scale of this gap is what makes the rest of this conversation matter. Women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. You've probably heard me say this before. That phrase has been circulating in leadership conversations for years. I want to make sure we understand exactly what it means, as the nuance can sometimes get lost. The McKinsey and Leading Women in the Workplace report has consistently shown that women receive mentorship at comparable or even higher rates than men, and yet they are still promoted at lower rates, particularly at that first critical step into senior leadership. Research from Catalyst found that women with mentors are more likely to be satisfied in their careers, but they are not more likely to be promoted at the same rate as men with sponsors. Research also shows that sponsorship is a powerful predictor of advancement. So the gap is not about ambition. It's not about capability. It's about access to specific kind of relationship that most career development advice does not actually tell you how to build. So I'll say it again. It's not that you lack the ambition or the capability. It's about the relationship and not always understanding how do you build this relationship. So now we know the gap exists. It's important to get precise about what we're actually talking about because the distinction matters for everything that we'll be discussing in this episode. So I want to keep this next section focused because episode 131 goes deep on the full mechanics of what sponsors do and how they operate. If you want that complete picture, the link is in your show notes. What I want to do here instead is make the distinction concrete enough that everything that follows lands clearly. A mentor advises you. A sponsor advocates for you. Your mentor has a conversation with you while your sponsor has a conversation about you when you are not in the room. Your mentor says things like, here's how I would handle that situation. Your sponsor says, she's exactly who we need leading that initiative. Your mentor helps you get better. Your sponsor helps you get seen. If your career is a door you are trying to open, your mentor gives you better ways to knock on that door. Your sponsor, however, has a key to open that door. And the research is clear. What gets you through the door is the key. So let's talk about why so many women end up with better knocking techniques and no key. Because let's be clear, the sponsorship gap is not random. There are specific, identifiable reasons why women are more likely to accumulate mentors and less likely to develop sponsors. When you understand these reasons, you can start to address them strategically. Reason number one, the system defaults to familiar patterns. Sponsorship, at its core, is a reputational investment. When a senior leader sponsors you, they are putting their credibility behind you. They are saying, in effect, I vouch for this person. And because it is reputational risk, sponsors tend to default to people who feel familiar, people whose trajectory mirrors theirs, whose communication style feels natural to them, whose presence in a room reads as leadership material by whatever standard they are using, consciously or not. In organizations where the majority of senior leaders are men, that default pattern disproportionately benefits other men. It is not always intentional, but intention does not change impact. The informal system of sponsorship was built inside networks that women are still gaining full access to, and whose networks do not automatically restructure themselves when women arrive on the scene. That's reason number one. Reason number two, women are actively directed more towards mentorship. When women express ambition, when they want to climb the corporate ladder, they are often met with development-focused responses, such as, let me introduce you to someone who can coach you. Have you considered finding a mentor? Those responses are not necessarily bad in isolation, but they become a problem when they are consistently offered in place of advocacy-based responses, which would sound more like, let me put your name in for that project, or I'm going to make sure the right people know what you did on that initiative. This is not always deliberate redirection, but the effect is the same. The well-meaning advice to get a mentor can serve as a detour from the sponsorship conversation, leaving high-performing women stuck in a loop while the advocacy that actually opens doors goes to someone else. That's reason number two. Reason number three, many high-performing women do not ask for sponsorship because they do not know how to do that. And here, it's not about hesitation or self-doubt. It is a skills gap. Asking for mentorship is culturally familiar. Asking someone to advocate for you, to put their reputation behind yours, to name you in a room when you are not there, feels like a different kind of request. It feels presumptuous to many of the women I work with. And without a clear framework for how to have that conversation, most people simply do not have it. That is what we are fixing in this episode today. So before we talk about how to build a sponsorship relationship, I want to give you a quick diagnostic. Sometimes the issue is not that you lack a sponsor. It is that you are treating a potential sponsor like a mentor, which keeps the relationship in an advisory lane when it could easily be moving into an advocacy lane. Here are 3 signs that your current relationship is functioning as a mentorship when it has the potential for sponsorship. The first sign is your conversations are mostly about your development, not your opportunities. If the bulk of the conversations that you are having with a senior leader focus on your growth areas, your feedback from last quarter, your communication style, or your developmental plan, that is a mentoring dynamic. Those conversations are valuable, don't get me wrong. But if they are never shifting toward, here's what's coming up in the organization and here's where I see you, that relationship has not made the move into sponsorship territory. Sign number 2, they know your potential, but not your specific goals. Sponsors advocate for specific things. They focus on things like she should lead the new product launch, or she is ready for a VP role. She needs to be on the task force for this. If the senior leaders who like you and speak highly of you do not know your specific next goal, they cannot advocate for them. They might say genuinely positive things about you overall and your talent, but that general praise rarely translates into the kind of targeted advocacy that moves your career forward. Sign number 3, the relationship is mostly one-directional. Mentorship tends to flow in one direction. Advice flows from a senior leader to you. Sponsorship is a mutual investment. Your sponsor is investing their credibility in you. And part of what makes that relationship sustainable is that you are delivering results that reinforce their investment. So that means it makes them look good too. If your relationship with a senior leader has not yet involved you contributing something of value to their priorities, whether through your work on a project, your insights, your visibility in a key initiative, you have not yet built the foundation that makes sponsorship feel like a natural next step for them. By the way, none of these signs means the relationship can't grow. They are a signal that you may need to intentionally shift the dynamic. So here's the framework I want to give you today. I call it the V.I.S.A method, V.I.S.A, V-I-S-A method, because the goal of sponsorship is to gain access to rooms and opportunities you haven't been in yet. And a visa, as you know, is what gets you in. So V.I.S.A stands for visibility, impact, strategic alignment, and the ask. So V is for visibility. Your potential sponsor can't advocate for you if they don't see you. And I do not mean casual, general visibility. I mean strategic, specific visibility in the areas that matter to influential people. And this starts with being intentional about where and how you show up in those spaces. If there's a senior leader you would like to develop a sponsorship relationship with, ask yourself, what do they care about? What are they working on? What would make their work easier or more successful? Then look for legitimate opportunities to be visible in those spaces. For Simone, the client I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, this meant volunteering to present data at a cross-functional meeting led by her potential sponsor. She was not angling for attention, by the way. She was genuinely contributing, but she was doing it in a space where her work would be seen by the right person. The visibility has to be real. It must be backed by actual results and genuine contribution. This is not a performance. It is strategic positioning. So that is your V in Visa. And next up, we have I, which stands for impact. Once you are visible, you need to communicate your impact clearly and without apology. This is where your communication skills become a direct career accelerator. Many of the women I coach are doing exceptional work, but when asked about their contributions, they default to collaborative framing. They would say something like, "We accomplished this. The team did a great job." And while collaboration is genuinely important, it becomes a problem when your specific contribution disappears into collective language. You have to learn to own your impact verbally, not in a way that dismisses your team, but in a way that makes your specific role clear. Here's a language pattern that works really well. I led the strategy and our team executed it brilliantly. The result was blah, blah, blah. That one sentence does both things. It claims your leadership and it honors the collaboration. When you communicate your impact clearly, you give potential sponsors the language they need to advocate for you. They cannot say she drove the revenue increase on that initiative if they have never heard you say it first. Next up, we have the S in Visa, which stands for strategic alignment. This is the step most people miss entirely. Strategic alignment means making sure your potential sponsor knows your specific goals and understand how your goals align with what they and the organization need. This is not a generic conversation. It must be a targeted one. Here's a script you can use, and I encourage you to hear how direct this is because directness is what makes it work. Here's the script. I have been thinking about the direction of the department. I see a real opportunity in this specific area. My goal over the next year is to move into this specific responsibility or role. I would love your perspective on what it would take to position myself for that and whether you see the same opportunity as I do. If you want the specific script, I'll drop it in the show notes so that you can grab it there. That conversation does a few important things. It shows you are thinking strategically, not simply thinking about executing tasks. It states your goal specifically, which gives your potential sponsors something concrete to advocate for. And it invites them into a partnership dynamic by asking for their perspective. And then finally, we have the A in V.I.S.A, which stands for your ask. The ask is the piece most people never get to. And honestly, it's the piece that turns a mentor into a sponsor. At some point, you have to make a specific, direct request for advocacy, not a vague, please support me. You need to make a specific ask. And it could sound something like, if the opportunity for this specific project comes up, I would be grateful if you would consider putting my name forward. I'm committed to delivering, and I know your endorsement carries weight. Or you could say, I know you have visibility into the planning for X initiative. If there is a leadership role on that project, I would love to be considered for it. Is that something you would be willing to champion? These asks are direct, they are respectful, and they make the nature of the relationship explicit, which is actually a gift to both people. Your potential sponsor knows exactly how they can support you, and you have moved the relationship from advisory to advocacy. When Simone finally had this conversation with a senior leader in her organization, she told me afterwards, it felt so scary. And then it felt like relief. Her potential sponsor responded by saying, I'm glad you told me. I had no idea you were interested in moving in that direction. He had assumed she was happy where she was. She had assumed he knew she wanted more. No one said anything, and nothing changed until she made the ask. Because the ask is what closes that gap. Before I send you off with the V.I.S.A framework, I want to say something I do not say enough. The V.I.S.A method is a tool. It is a communication strategy that will help you build the relationships that drive career advancement. And it works. I have seen it work with women I coach, but it does not fix everything, and I will not pretend otherwise. The sponsorship gap is not just a skills gap. It is also a systems problem. There are some organizations that do not actively create sponsorship programs, that don't hold senior leaders accountable for advocating across differences, that don't examine who gets sponsored and who doesn't. And they will continue to produce these gaps regardless of how strategically individual women communicate. The burden of closing the sponsorship gap should not rest entirely on the women who are experiencing it. And yet, we live and work in the systems we live and work in. So what I encourage you to do is work the strategy so hard that your path becomes undeniable. And I also encourage you to keep your eyes open about the environments you are in. If you have deployed every tool in this framework and the path is still blocked, that is information. It might be information about a specific relationship that is not going to move into sponsorship, no matter what you do, or it might be information about the organization itself. And both of those are data points worth having. Your talent is not the variable in that equation, and you deserve to be in the rooms that recognize that. And speaking of rooms, let me tell you how you can get into one with me. If today's episode gave you something to work with, I want to invite you to take the next step with me directly. I work with women leaders who are ready to move from doing exceptional work in the background to being seen, sponsored, and promoted. And if that is exactly where you are, the Leadership Clarity Call is the place to start. It is a complimentary conversation where we get specific about your goals, the gaps, and what your path forward looks like. The link to book your strategy call is in the show notes. Take a look, and if it feels aligned, book your spot. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I know your time is valuable, and I never take it for granted. If this episode resonated with you, share it with another woman in your life who is doing the work and deserves more recognition than she is getting. That might be the most powerful thing you do today. Until next Monday, my friend, I am Kele, remind you that great communication is the foundation of inspiring leadership. Keep learning, keep growing, and remember to communicate to lead.